It's incredibly difficult to fully appreciate hand-drawn animation without physically doing it. So that's why I'm here. Technically, this is a dark room, but I'm using this light table over here to put together a 1-second animation with just charcoal and paper. Now, back in the 30s, they used celluloid pen and ink, which only made this process even longer. But regardless, let me show you the 1-second animation I've made. This looping animation took me 5 hours to complete, and it's 1 second. So I can only imagine what making 30s cartoons and Cuphead, a game that stylizes itself after them, was like. For classic cartoons, there was a large staff of animators, photographers, inkers, etc. But Cuphead was only done by 19 people, only 7 of which were animators. The game took 7 years to make because each frame of animation had to be meticulously drawn and animated on paper in order to capture that style. In stylizing itself like classic cartoons, Cuphead places itself amongst those cartoons, specifically the work of Max Fleischer and his studio. Fleischer's cartoons are incredibly groundbreaking. Famously, Fleischer invented the rotoscope, a device that allows for fluid animation to be done over live-action film. The device taught Max and his brother Dave how to create animation. Its legacy led to the motion capture technology used so much today for animation and special effects. But as time went on, the brothers didn't rely so much on it, using it primarily for complex movements and reference. They learned the art of animation, and it liberated them, allowing them to break from the confines of realistic movement and define the wildly stylized nature 30s cartoons have. In these cartoons, everything is fair game for a gag, a twist, or a character. The world is truly alive in these cartoons. Contrary to what Disney was doing, the Fleischer cartoons also took on a more risque and urban feel, characterized by Betty Boop. Betty is not your typical happy-go-lucky cartoon character. She's promiscuous, independent, and rebellious, representing everything her flapper design alludes to. On top of this, Fleischer's cartoons had an edge in their content, like in Ha Ha Ha, where Betty and Coco accidentally drug the entire city of New York with laughing gas, or in Swing You Sinners, where Bimbo tries to escape the army of the dead and the judgment of his sins. These cartoons had some genuinely demented imagery in them, and pushed the medium of animation with their surreal worlds, in which everything seems to dance. Fleischer had a very close relationship with sound. 4 years prior to Steamboat Willie, Fleischer had a series called Song Cartoons, which pioneered the follow the bouncing ball approach to karaoke singing. Moreover though, there were experiments of early sound film before the jazz singer would usher in the sound era. When sound was popularized, Fleischer's relationship flourished. As previously stated, his cartoons had dancing elements to them. The sound is so closely knit to what appears on screen that the screen seems to dance along to the music. Many of the cartoons had a musical number in them. These numbers gave the first film appearances of many of the jazz legends working at the time, such as Calloway. Take a look at this musical number from Minnie the Moocher.
Folks, now here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a red-hot hoochie coocher.
This sequence here sums up everything I'm talking about. Betty and Bimbo are terrified as they stare ghosts, electric chairs, and demons in the face. Meanwhile, Calloway's famous dancing is rotoscoped onto this ghost. The whole world has character as it moves to this obituary song about a homeless lady in Indianapolis. Through this frequent emphasis on the sound of the cartoon, along with its wild visuals, the Fleischer cartoons begin to serve as a microcosm of the jazz era of the 1930s. Think about it. They have dark, depressing themes, just like many of the popular blues and jazz songs of the era, including Minnie the Moocher, an almost improvisational movement that subverts the expectations of the world's rules, relevant to jazz as a genre, subverting expectations with its breaking away from musical structure with improvisation, as well as the disillusionment with the world as it was in the Depression, and plunging itself into another world war. Now, in 2017, we have Cuphead, complete with live jazz, hand-drawn animation, and a slew of references to classic cartoons. Cuphead wears its influences proudly. It goes so far as to name its world Inkwell Isle, as a reference to Inkwell Studios, the first studio founded by none other than Max Fleischer. Along with its frequent and direct homage to Fleischer's work, Cuphead captures the same feel the Fleischer cartoons do. Just like these classic cartoons, Cuphead is married to darker themes, expressive animation, and lively sound, but takes those things a step further by adapting them to the interactive language of games. All of this has been achieved through the brilliant levels and boss fights. Well, except the dragon. Screw that dragon. But in the beginning, the central premise of the game underscores the dark tones found in classic cartoons. Cuphead and Mugman made a deal with the devil when they were gambling. When Cuphead rolls wrong, the devil gets their souls. But in making a compromise, Cuphead and Mugman get to keep their souls if they collect the debts of the bosses in the game. Of course, with a premise involving deals with the demonic, gambling addictions, and debt, the subtle dark themes are established, but Cuphead takes this a step further with its character design. Chad Moldenhauer, the lead artist for Cuphead, was influenced by the creepy character design of these classic cartoons, saying in an interview with Time magazine, quote, "Why would a character go from super happy to just insane and showing his gums like a wild dog because he wants a piece of candy? It's only for 2 or 3 seconds and then it cuts back to, oh, the guy's 100% normal." You can't quite put your finger on why it's disturbing, but it's all the small pieces coming together to give it that feel. Having eyes and mouths on almost every object doesn't help. So Cuphead brings all manner of objects to life in an unsettling way. The run-and-gun level Funhouse Frazzle really demonstrates this. Cars, toy ducks, walls, star cannons, mini rockets, jack-in-the-boxes, jacks, and tubas all come to life with a unique flair and personality. The unsettling living wall and jack-in-the-box capture that creepy element. The wall opens its mouth, holds out a sign saying "uh-oh," a subtle nod to Looney Tunes director Tex Avery, and then shoots its tongue across the screen. The sign is an homage and adds to the aesthetic and feel, but also blends with gameplay as a telegraph for an attack. The jack-in-the-boxes certainly are unsettling as well. The box has a spinning realistic eye on it, and the jack isn't so comforting either. But when it attacks, Jack pops out, laughs, goes back in, the hat lingers for a while, then shoots at the player's current location. The laughing and the lingering serve as similar telegraphing elements, creating a visual and auditory cue, alerting the player of the projectile. But also, it serves as a great example of Cuphead's ability to make anything a dangerous object that can hurt the player, helping it bring the world to life, like Fleischer's cartoons did. Furthermore, this is consistent with the art style. When a cartoon character rapidly moves, they do not move all at once. Often a piece of them, such as a hat, will remain before it too moves. The way these characters move in both run and gun and boss fights also serve to capture the expressiveness, meaning the stylized movement and characters of these cartoons. In the level Ruse of an Ooze, Cuphead finds himself fighting a blob named Goopy Legrand. Most of this boss fight plays out a lot like Monstro from The Binding of Isaac, but in his final phase, his own gravestone absorbs his consciousness and begins to attack the player. When Goopy comes in to crush you, notice the way he tilts back, telling the player to get out of the way before falling down. Jake Clark, the animator for this boss, says at GDC,
"If I do it this way, then I not only get change of shape, but I get change of color and change of perspective as well, because I find kind of just the more something changes, the more visual gravity it's going to have."
When I say that Cuphead takes the feel of these 30s cartoons and adapts them to gameplay, this is what I mean. The gravestone has the same absurdity and darkness of these classic cartoons, and would not feel out of place in any of them, but also moves in such a way as to convey the size and weight of the character, as well as give a clear antic to the player to move. The intensity of this situation is only emphasized by the music. As previously stated, Cuphead's soundtrack was recorded by a live jazz band. Knowing Max Fleischer's and really all animators at the time's relationship with music, it's no surprise Cuphead's music bolsters the game so well. The game frequently uses looping animations, such as this one of Cuphead bobbing up and down, to create that dancing feel these cartoons have. Almost all the bosses have the same kind of idle animation that loops to give the impression of dancing. But jazz is in more than just the animation and music. Cuphead's boss fights feature a heavy amount of randomness in their attacks. The order of attacks, projectiles, patterns, and locations are all fair game to be randomized from boss fight to boss fight, which ends up accounting for a lot of the game's unrelenting difficulty. But these random elements force an improvisational, almost jazz-like gameplay in the player. The player can never predict where a boss will be, what attack they will do, or in some situations where they will be able to attack the boss from. I mentioned this in my video on creativity-focused games, which I call canvas games, but jazz requires learning a set of certain rules before improvisation can be done well. Cuphead's gameplay works in the same way. It's near impossible to beat a boss on the first try. The player has to learn what attacks the boss does and how to avoid them before they can really beat it. In my playthrough, there was only one instance where we actually beat a boss on the first try, that being the first boss, the root pack. These different attacks and patterns are the fundamental rules the player has to learn so that when the order of attacks, for example, is randomized, the player can improvise their gameplay in order to properly avoid it. The jazz-like improvisation is perhaps the biggest way Cuphead introduces gameplay to the style of 30s cartoons, and thusly places itself in context among them. Cuphead's the type of game that's almost impossible to fully appreciate when you play it. Its difficulty requires such a deep focus on movement and attacking that the beautiful watercolor backgrounds and subtle animation details can be missed. Listening to the soundtrack while making this video, it's like listening to a really fast jazz album for the first time, because when you play, you aren't acutely aware of it. What's so great about Cuphead is that its playing experience is fast-paced and a ton of fun, but its viewer experience is awe-inspiring, since it allows you to truly take in the gorgeous detail Studio MDHR spent 7 years on. It's homage done right, and in a year where homages to the works of the past are extremely prevalent and all done incredibly well, Cuphead counts itself among the best.
Howdy, howdy, ho.
Howdy, howdy, ho.
She messed around with a bloke named Smokey. She loved him though he was cokey. He took her down to Chinatown. He